All right, so we are now being recorded. We'll have a chance to introduce ourselves as a part of this racial justice panel for the Bishop McNamara larger community. Ms. Cobbs?
Good morning. I'm Jaleshae Cobbs. I will be moderating today's panel on social justice. I'm here because this impacts me and my family. So I'm looking forward to discussing today with everyone here.
Ms. Carter?
Good morning. My name is Dee Ann Carter. I am the principal at Bishop McNamara High School, and I am excited to be part of the panel today.
Stephan?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Stephan Golas. I'm currently the Director of University Relations at an international school in Toronto, Canada. Before that, I worked in the same role at Maret School in DC, which some of you may know if you've rolled around the city. And this is now my 20th year working in admissions and college counseling, but I would also say my 20th year speaking out in the independent school world about issues of racial justice.
Thanks. Janiya?
Hi, my name is Janiya Hepburn. I'm a recent graduate from Bishop McNamara, and I am on this call because I'm Black and I have eyes and I see what's going on in the world right now and what's been going on. So I just feel that it's necessary for as many of us to speak for ourselves as possible.
Awesome. Ayanna?
Hi, my name is Ayanna McCarley. I'm also a recent graduate at Bishop McNamara. I am here to participate in a discussion that needs to be had. I think that this will help our community grow and progress into the society that we want to see.
Awesome. And Dave?
I'm Dave Moniz. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at PLEXUSS. And I've been working in college access programs for more or less the last 20 years. So I'm happy to be invited. Hope to make some contributions to the discussion. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. And I'm Alicia Oglesby. I'm the Director of School and College Counseling at Bishop McNamara High School. And I'm here really to be a support to students and help further this conversation within our school community.
All right, so what do you think people are trying to gain by participating in these current nationwide protests?
I think that people finally have had an awakening. I think there were a lot of people who had who were lying dormant for a while, and I think people finally just, saw the injustice for what it really is, and I think people were just fed up. I mean, everybody. I think everybody's just fed up. It didn't help that we had all been in our homes, for 10, 11, 12 weeks. But people were just fed up. I just really think, it's like a volcano that finally erupted and people were just like, we're not going to tolerate this anymore. So all people coming together, Black, white, brown, young, old, everybody. I mean, it is overwhelming to me. It's amazing, very powerful times. As an educator who is also raising an African-American teenage boy and a young woman, for me, it is very powerful to make sure that my kids, when they leave my house, I have an 18-year-old and a 21-year-old, when they leave the house, that they're safe. I'm always worried when they both leave the house. And I think too many people were just, not doing what they needed to do. And I think people finally got fed up. So I'm really encouraged by what's going on these days.
Yeah, I agree with Ms. Carter also as a parent and as an educator and having, a school full of brown children and working in communities where I know that it can be scary, a different experience for some students than others. And so I think that it's been sort of right below the surface for quite a while, if not maybe, you know, years and decades and hundreds of years. And there have been, you know, protests throughout the decades. And I think this movement in particular is a culmination of things like Ms. Carter mentioned. We were in the house, we were out of school, people were laid off of work. And I think people are realizing, at least now within the last 10 years, is that certain systems don't work for us or don't work the way that we need them to work. And so people are ready to, you know, step up. People that may not have said anything, you know, 5 years ago, 6, 7 years ago, are now ready to say something and move to say something. So I think that's pretty powerful.
Okay, so I agree with both Miss Carter and Miss Oglesby. I think that it's quite simple what people want. They want equality and they want justice. I would say that the world should honestly be grateful that people of color and Black people don't want revenge. Because if they wanted revenge, what's happening now would be much worse. Right now, we're simply just asking for the same thing that white people and people in superior positions get. I think that, like they both said, people are honestly just fed up. I think that this movement in particular had a certain spark to it because, as Ms. Carter mentioned, we were sitting at home for God knows how long. Everyone was quarantined. All you could do was sit there and watch these recent videos and hear about these certain, you know, traumatic situations that ended in fatality or were just unfair. So I think it forced people to look at the ugliness of our systems, of racism, of America as it is. One can be proud because this country has done amazing things, but it's also done some really horrible things. And I think it's just a time where people are, like they both mentioned, just it's clicking for them. Something is hitting for them. And also, not to brag on my own generation, but I think that we have a certain revolutionary like thing about us that it's just different. I can't really explain it. And I don't credit it all to ourselves. I think we've seen our parents and our ancestors have this certain strength and we've admired it and not known how to exactly replicate it. But I think instead of replicating it, we're making it our own thing. And we're coming a bit harder than maybe they have. Well, not harder, but just in a really strong, different way. And I think some of the times why we receive resistance for that is because America's not used to it. And so they're like, whoa, like, what is this? Like, come on, guys, we gave you what you want. Like, but I just think it's a matter of everybody has a different way of protesting, if you will. Everyone has a different way of using their voice nowadays. There's so many different ways that you can do it. And I like what's happening. As Ms. Carter said, I see a lot of different allies from other races stepping alongside Black people and people of color. And it's just making me really happy that we can unify, you know, like just to know that we can do it and actually seeing it sort of come to fruition has been really, really nice to see. And I hope it really continues.
All right, so this question is for Alicia and Stephan or Miss Oglesby. What is important to know about the events happening right now?
Well, I think one thing that's important for everybody to remember is that the protests that we're seeing and people speaking out that we're seeing, it's not because of one event. It is years, if not decades, if centuries of a system, a culture, a society that has subjugated people. And in particular, Black and African American people. I mean, I think we continue to talk around things often when we say things like people of color, when we're talking about racism. But I think the anti-Blackness that exists in America is real and deep. And, you know, Janiya said, I have eyes and I have ears. so do white folks. And that it took us being, as Ms. Carter said, we've been sort of, cooped up for weeks, and despite the fact that we've been under quarantine and we've been cooped up, this still happened. Mr. Floyd's murder still happened, and I think that while there is an awakening here, what's really happened, or I think what's really important to recognize, is that white folks have finally, a lot of white folks have started to see that they've been ignoring what has always been in front of them. And well, yes, it is wonderful to see lots of different people rallying around this cause. I think it's important to remember that what's really going on here isn't something that is new. And I would also add to that, what's also going on now is people are taking a serious look at policing and police brutality in this country in a way that I don't think they have before. And they're furious about it. And I think we are starting to see a glimmer of hope that there will be some systemic change.
Yeah, so I want to definitely second that, particularly around the systemic change that we are really realizing, I think, especially at this moment, is possible. And I think that people are more and more thinking about how things can be different and how we might want things to be different in our communities. The role that we want the police to play in our communities, in our schools, those conversations I think are at the forefront, which is exciting to see, because I think it's an invitation for us to find better ways to be together and to coexist and to collaborate in ways where, Black people in our communities and in our schools can feel safe. I think it's important to have those systemic conversations and address the systemic needs in a way that is broadly sweeping our institutions. And they're, not necessarily just about one person here and one person there, but just about how systems work together to make sure that we're really getting what we need from all the places that we interact with, and all the institutions that we interact with. So I think that's important. I think that it's helpful to hear from researchers who have been studying this for decades. This isn't, like Stephan said, this isn't necessarily new information. And I think that researchers and professors and people who have been, really embedded in this work for a really long time are excited to share the information that they have been studying for a really long time, and that now they have the eyes and ears that people who are in, positions of power that do something are willing to listen and to do something. So I think that that's important to keep in mind too.
All right, this question is for Dave and Ayanna. How have you seen young people participating in the protests, and what do you think about their motivations?
I've seen a lot of people my age going down to the front lines. I've had friends go down to DC and protest every day since the protest started, which I think is amazing. And then you have people such as myself who aren't able to go down to the front lines, donating, sharing resources whenever they can, educating people on the Black Lives Matter movement and why it's so important, having conversations with people who don't understand, educating themselves on different laws, history, and other awareness campaigns to help better educate themselves, as well as donating. And I think our biggest motivation is the fact that we're tired of seeing people that look like our fathers, our brothers, our mothers, our aunts, our uncles, our cousins, and our friends being abused by the system. And I wish I could say like it's the system that was designed to help protect us. But if you think about it, the police force was never really designed to protect Black people. It was originally the slave patrol that was used to help catch and kill us. And I think that that was something that a lot of us don't really know. But then at the same time, I think that our biggest motivation is trying to change it so that we can make people realize like, hey, we bleed the same blood that you do. And I think it's infuriating that we have to keep having this conversation and trying to make people understand we are human too.
So I'm proud of the students. I'm scared for them. And when I look at some of the student-led protests, that's one of the most important things to me, that the kids who are being most affected physically and by what they see are creating a space for themselves where they're the ones sending the message. They're the ones talking about truthfully what's happening to them. And it is nice that there are more white people now who are receptive. You know, they have eyes and ears. They need to keep their mouths closed, present moment excluded maybe. But the students' motivations are exceptional, because they, at least now with all the cameras that are on, it's easier for people who are sitting comfortably in their homes to understand, you know, why the students are doing this and what they're putting at risk. They're risking their lives, literally. But they're best equipped to speak the truth. And as someone who's a little bit older now, I think we want to make sure that they're given as much space as possible, freedom as possible. And I hate to say this in a jaded sounding way, but before they get jaded, before they see this movement potentially not make as much progress as they're expecting. I want to see the students not accept that, because they haven't seen none of us have seen a movement like this fail before. This movement is different. This moment is different. So the students being at the center of it, we need to empower them. We need to support them. We need to donate it if we can't be out there on the front lines. And that's what has me most excited. And they are competent. They're competent.
All right, so this question's for Ms. Carter and Ms. Oglesby. How have you seen adults supporting protesters and others in the community who are upset about violence and injustice?
Thank you, Ms. Cobbs. I've seen adults on the front lines, you know, marching and protesting. I love it when I see people who are willing to go down, take their children with them, so that they have their children with them, and their children are seeing, you know, what the injustice is and what we're fighting for. Everyone in the call has already mentioned the donation piece. I also love the fact that people are encouraging people to vote. You gotta encourage, you know, these adults who are downtown, you know, people. I watched someone on the news the other day saying we can do all of this, but we've also got to vote. I mean, we've got to make sure that we're voting, that we're encouraging, you know, people to choose leaders that are going to enact change. Because we can march and do all of the things we want to do, but I mean, it's the higher ups that make the change a lot of times. So I definitely see that. I definitely love some of the adults who have, you know, adults who are very influential, you know, speaking out on social media. Social media is a powerful thing. I always used to call it the downfall of mankind, but it's a very powerful thing. And if we can use our voice to be powerful on social media, I love that. I mean, I love that, you know, there are stars and, you know, people who make a lot more money than the people on this call do, you know, speaking out, donating their time and money to do that, because a lot of times, you know, people hear things from them before they hear them from us. So I'm very happy to see that. So I think if the adults keep doing what they know that they are required to do, it's really impactful. And then the power of prayer. I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that. A lot of leaders, especially religious leaders, have come in support of, you know, everything that people are doing. So I want to make sure that the adults that we are continue to pray for our young people, pray for change, and pray for the people who are leading us right now to enact some of that change.
Yes, I think when the protests initially started to happen in the DMV, I feel really proud of our team and that our community, I mean, the students sort of took their own lead and did their own thing and started their own conversations, which is, always something that I want to see and that I want to empower. And the adults jumped right in as well. And we immediately got to planning and talking about how are we going to address this? How are we going to make sure there's space at the table for students and student voice? And I think that is incredibly important ongoing. It's very true to our community anyway. We are a very student-led community, and I think the adults at McNamara in particular are always creating those spaces and making sure that we are accountable to our students and our families. I think the adults are doing what is necessary in terms of being a support to the young people in our lives, the young people out in the street, hundreds and thousands of people marching down 16th Street or 14th Street, and the adults at least are making space. They're stepping back. They're not complaining about the kids on their lawn. They are very much just watching it unfold without interfering in a negative way, which I think is really important.
Thanks. All right, so this question is for Ayanna, Janiya, and Stephan. What do you think will happen in cities across the country due to these protests and calls for justice?
I think that it'll force a lot of local and state officials to act just because everybody's eyes are on them to do something. But also in a way, I think that it's also maybe going to go back to like a lot of empty promises, just because like from personal experience, I've always had like this hope that we will change, like the Trayvon Martin case, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, like something will change. And then we kind of just like fell back and nothing happened. And it kind of repeated the cycle over and over again. But I do have hope this time that since so many countries and cities are out protesting, I do think that something will happen and it will occur. And I think also for me, like I will personally like to see a change in our education system. I think that our curriculum is so whitewashed nationwide that it stems from a lot of things going on, people not knowing. My brother and I were talking and it was like, first it starts with exposure. Then you have to learn about it to understand it. And I think that once we all come together and we're taught the different things and different people and different races and ethnicities and their backgrounds, then we can learn how to coexist together, not even just coexist, but to unite together fully. And I think that'll help us progress in society. And also our teachers are like our biggest influences. We're there with them majority of our life throughout the week. I think we're there like 8 hours a day. I think our teachers have just as big of an influence on us as our parents do, maybe even bigger. So I think once we can help create a system where teachers are learning more and our students are learning more, then I think that we can progress as a society.
Okay, so I completely agree with Ayanna. We spend, especially at McNamara, being such a, I don't know, just such a family. Like everybody's there like all day. Like nobody goes home. So I think that most schools, or at least some other schools, are like that. You spend most of your day with your with your school, and maybe the last few with your parents in the first morning half. So it's really important that during those moments we instill the truth and so much knowledge in everyone that is there, the teachers, the students, everyone, just so that they can be aware. But like Ayanna, one part of me is, super hopeful that this is gonna be like the one. Like, okay, this is gonna be the one. Like, something's gonna change in our systems. Something's gonna click in people's minds. But another part of me feels like within our own community and America as a whole, this country as a whole, this world as a whole, will become laxed again, like she said. I mean, our first experience, I feel like our particular age group, our first experience with seeing police brutality for what it was. Like, our parents may have spoken about it, but seeing it was probably the Trayvon Martin. And ever since then, which was in 2013, I think some of us have always wondered, hey, this is not okay. Like, we want this to change, but we didn't exactly know how. I think the difference is that now, after these protests and things like that, for one, I'm not going to let it die because I'm of age now. So I think there's so many of us who are in our age group and our age bracket who are like, okay, the adults, we understand that you guys have done what you could do. You may feel that way, or you may feel like, I'm tired of fighting this fight. Well, now it's our job to sort of pick up that mantle and really put some fire in it. So sorry, I have something else to say. I feel like conversations are going to be started. I think that nothing can change without conversation. Nobody can know unless they hear the other side, unless they hear the other perspective. And it's not just a black and white. It's racist to non-racist. It's person of color to non-person of color. Everybody needs to hear the other perspective, because being one-minded and only seeing the world from your point of view is the exact problem that we have. That's why we have things like white privilege. That's why we have Black people who, rightfully so, have a certain hate to white people or something like that, because they don't understand their perspective, which doesn't make it any better that they experience what they experience, but it will help the world at least begin to have conversations that are not arguments, that are not debates. We're actually having a conversation and speaking to one another. Like this, what we're doing right now is not common. Like, that doesn't happen. People are screaming at each other, and I find myself screaming at somebody. I find them screaming at me. And then by that time, we're not hearing to listen. We're hearing to defend. So I think that having healthier conversations will definitely come from this. I'm hoping that people are going to start really paying attention to the voting aspect, but also paying attention to just communal work. I feel like a lot of times everything is looked at on this grand scale. Everybody's like, vote in the presidential election, and people are knocking on your doors in November, but nobody really did it in June. It came up the day of. They was like, oh yeah, by the way, go vote. That's not what we got to do. We got to really educate people on, number one, who's running. People have to educate themselves in that, because a lot of times it's hard to find that information, which is really weird. I think that's a part of the system. Like, they try and make sure that you don't know too much. You can't know too much, because if you just got to know the name. Like, everybody was going to be like, okay, let's just go with Bernie Sanders. Or here, everybody's like, let's just go with Vincent Gray, because it's just easier to hear the name that you're familiar with instead of educating yourself. So I think people are now deciding, hey, I'm tired of that. I'm tired of the world determining who I want to vote for, right, who I want to believe will actually have an effective change in my community. I'm going to educate myself on it. So I think that's something that's amazing. And I'm hoping that with that, on local levels and grander levels, that's a word, sorry, that, policing will become better, because whoever you elect in those positions to fund those people and their jobs and stuff like that, it all connects. It's all just a system that flows. So I'm hoping that people will not forget the work that needs to be done in the community, like going to people's door, just having a conversation with them, going to your local Boys and Girls Club, or just, things like that, being a mentor to a kid, anything like that can really just be the effects of change on a smaller level that will affect the bigger level. And that's what I hope for.
Janiya, I think, took the words right out of my mouth when she said that folks need to start listening to hear each other. And I think you said listen to defend. And I like to say listening to respond, but I think it's we're part of the same chorus, right? Like, and I think particularly for white folks, everything that has happened in the last few weeks has been a massive wake-up call for us. that we gotta, like Dave said, shut our mouths. Sorry, I'm being really blunt here, but we gotta shut our mouths and open our ears. And it sounds corny, and we gotta open our hearts, because we are failing to see the humanity in Black and brown folks. Like, that's what we've done for centuries. And I do think that local leaders, particularly white local leaders, are starting to see that they have been ignoring Black voices for far too long. And I'm hopeful, and I mean, you don't need to know my business, but I grew up in Camden, New Jersey. I know Ms. Oglesby knows Camden because she grew up across the river in Philly. But when I was growing up in Camden, like, you didn't leave your home. You just didn't. And it was just a dangerous place. Now, I am seeing on TV how Camden, New Jersey is like what all municipalities and cities aspire to be, in terms of the way that police forces aren't there to just protect and serve. They are there to interact, know, and love and embrace the community. Is it perfect? No. But it blows my mind that in the last 20 years, that city has completely turned around the way that it sees its role as to serve the needs of all of its citizens. And that, I think, is something that we're going to see change when we're seeing in Los Angeles, just the change in the way that the mayor is going to be funding the police. We're seeing that in Minneapolis as well. And defunding the police doesn't mean that you're just taking all the resources away from the police. So just make sure that, if you hear that, guys and girls, it means we're not just getting rid of the police and we're not giving them money anymore to do their jobs, but it means that we're looking at the way police and policing is done and making sure that it is equitable and that it is fair and that it is not just targeting one group of people. And I do think too, again, as Jana said, like local leaders, it's starting from the bottom. It's going to trickle up to state leaders. And I'm hopeful that those state leaders will listen, and that, people like senators and senators and Congress people, well, I haven't had my coffee yet, guys, that they will really start bringing it to Washington to say, yo, look, like this is not something that just, people have been making up. The revolution is being televised. And if we ignore it, then we are not doing our jobs. I will say that I'm a little fearful, to get back to the original question of what's going to happen to our cities, right? I'm fearful that this bifurcation that we've seen happen over the last 50 some odd years, where it's kind of like East Coast, West Coast versus the middle of the country, which I think is reductionist and not fair, or cities versus the suburbs versus the countryside. I am very fearful that that is going to continue, and I wonder what that means for people of color living in rural areas, for example. I wonder what that's going to mean for those of us who live in cities and the bubble effect that we sometimes find ourselves in, right? And it gets back to, again, this idea of like, are we really hearing each other? So I'm hopeful that our leaders of our cities are really going to start hearing folks and thinking more broadly about the structural changes that need to happen. I think it's going to happen. It has to.
I hope so too. This has been a really encouraging conversation so far, and we're at our last question, and this one's for Ms. Carter and Dave. How do you think schools can respond to injustice in the larger community?
I can start here. So I just want to tell a quick story real quick. The first time I ever heard Lift Every Voice and Sing was my freshman year at Hampton University, Black National Anthem written by James Weldon Johnson. I went to a public high school in Prince George's County. I went to an elementary school, Catholic elementary middle school in Prince George's County. And that was the first time I ever heard it. As a former elementary middle school principal, before I got to Bishop McNamara, I made sure that my students, pre-K on up, knew the words to James Weldon Johnson's "Lift Every Voice and Sing." And I think I couldn't believe I couldn't believe I had to get to college. I was 18 years old for the first time I ever heard that song. I think, my parents had played it, at home. But I mean, to sing it at school, like that just didn't happen. And I mean, that's just a small, like little window of something, when Janiya and Ayanna were talking about, educating and how much time they spend at school. I mean, the kids at Bishop McNamara High School, which pretty much most high schools around the country, I mean, always telling me, we're the building that never sleeps. And I've worked at 5 or 6 different high schools in my career, and most schools are like that. So yeah, we have the job of raising kids. And when people ask me how many kids I have, I gave birth to 2, but I have 857 students. I have 857 kids. And it's my responsibility as a school leader to ensure that these students have an understanding of what happens in the real world, making sure that we have a curriculum that reflects what they look like and what they understand. So, and it'll be very challenging. I mean, there's a lot of people that I'm going to have to move, and it's not going to happen overnight. Rome wasn't built in a day, definitely. But I'm willing to accept that challenge, and I know how important it is. And I'm willing to make that change and work with the wonderful faculty and staff that I have at Bishop McNamara High School, the parents, the students. I've also been getting a lot of emails from people saying, your students are posting these racist comments on social media. Well, there's a Bishop McNamara High School in Illinois. And unfortunately, I think some of those students there, I hate to say this on a recorded session, but I think some of the students there need some educating. They need to hear and understand what's going on in the world. And believe you me, I hope that lots of people see this. Those are not my students. And I'm not just talking about my Black and brown students. I'm talking about all of my students at Bishop McNamara High School. We don't speak like that. We would never say the things make those comments that people have been sending me. So please understand and know that our students are about loving each other. We're about educating the hearts and minds of students, and we're about uplifting people, no matter who those people are and what they look like. So just know that Bishop McNamara High School in Forestville, Maryland, on Marlboro Pike, we are not those people. Just know that I'm loving and educating these students in the best way I can. And with the support of my faculty and staff and my leadership team and our new president, Dr. John Barnhart, we're going to move mountains. And these are the people that are going to do it. The people who have just left us, Janiya and Anaya, and Ayanna and the class of 2020, they're going to affect a lot of change. And I know it's going to happen. So thank you, guys.
So I saw schools kind of fail for the first time in teaching about race when I was in high school, and it wasn't the sort of whitewashed standard textbook. But you read between the lines and you're like, oh, how many great leaders in the African American community were assassinated, and how many folks who didn't necessarily rise up to that level were lynched. And what was stolen from the Black community, not just from slavery, but from most of the things that have happened and been institutionalized since then that have oppressed the Black community in this country. So when I think about what schools can do, one, just for a practical matter, I've seen ethnic studies programs be very successful in a couple of areas. One, and I'll use San Francisco as an example, they developed an ethnic studies program as an intervention for 8th graders they'd identified who were at risk. And I feel obligated to try to explain this a little bit better. When we say ethnic studies, what we really should be saying is teaching the truth. We're not just, let's tell more stories about Black folks. No, let's tell you what really happened. And if you're black or brown, or you're certainly if you're an indigenous American, a native, you haven't seen the truth in your history classes. And hopefully that spills over into English classes. San Francisco did a wonderful study on this, and they had the privilege of being connected to Stanford University, so that the study got more attention. I was also just in my previous work involved with a school district in Tucson that had a very controversial ethnic studies program that also made its way to San Francisco because they had to sue the state superintendent, and it went up to the Ninth Circuit. So telling kids the truth in schools, I think, is one of the most effective ways to bring about change. White kids need to understand, I don't just live in this big house while other people are struggling to eat because of luck and hard work and poor decisions that other people made. They need to understand, this isn't going to solve the issue of personal racism, but understanding systemic racism and understanding how we got here. So I almost am hesitant to use the phrase ethnic studies, because I've seen how controversial it is in, I'll say, racist communities. It's very controversial in racist communities. But we know that it helps students of color. We know that it helps people who've not just been marginalized, but been shut out and wronged for centuries. We don't have as much evidence about how it will affect white kids who are learning the truth about race for the first time in their schools, but it can't hurt. And with, I feel like my generation fell short, Gen X, in case you're wondering, like we learned enough to understand the problems, but we didn't do enough about it. And the kids who are coming up now are going to do a better job. They've already proven that. And we need to make them the news story when they're leading peaceful protests. And that's what needs to go into the next set of history textbooks that are written.
Well, thank you everyone for participating in this discussion. It was very enlightening and good to hear from the students. You guys have been inspiring, and I know that you guys are gonna encourage the rest of the students in the school. So thanks for sharing everything today, and thanks for joining us, Stephan and Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.